and this is my pre-fight predictions on UFC 134, Nick Diaz versus Carlos Condit for the interim welterweight title in the UFC. First fight I'm going to predict is Rennie Baroa and Scott Jorgensen. Scott Jorgensen is a great wrestler. He's a purple belt in Jiu-Jitsu, got good striking, good wrestling, NCAA Division 1. Comes over from the WEC, had a few fights over here in the UFC. Rennie Baroa, he is currently riding the longest win streak in MMA. He's 27-1-1. His first loss he ever had was his first fight in MMA. But since then, he's a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. He's got great striking, great boxing. Both these fighters are well-rounded. I think, all in all, I think Rennie Baroa is the better striker. He's the better Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. But Scott Jorgensen always can rely on his wrestling background and his wrestling pedigree to pull him through on fights. In his last fight against Jeff Curran, he was losing the fight, but then he resorted back to his wrestling, used that, and won the fight by decision. But I think Rennie Baroa is the more well-rounded fighter. He's got the better striking. I think his jiu-jitsu is second to none, because the way he finished Brad Pickett at UFC 138 was phenomenal. He rocked him and then jumped his back, took it in 2 seconds and choked him out. And on this fight card, I'm going to go with Rennie Baroa for the win. And yeah, he's going to be going on to big things in the UFC for definite. So Rennie Baroa via second round submission. And moving on to the co-main event, we have Big Country Roy Nelson versus Fabricio Werdum. Werdum is coming off a loss against Alistair Overeem in the Strikeforce Grand Prix, Heavyweight Grand Prix. We've got Big Country coming off a win against Mirko Cro Cop. Before that, he was coming off a 2-fight loss to Julio Santos and Frank Mir. Breaking down this fight, Fabricio Werdum is a second-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Roy Nelson is a black belt. I think Fabricio Werdum is the better Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. I'm not saying Big Country can't submit Fabricio Werdum at any point, but I'd say Werdum's got the upper hand. When it comes to boxing, I'm going to say Fabricio Werdum has not got the one-punch knockout power like Roy Nelson has. It's just, this fight looks good. The only thing I will say is, when the UFC did cut Fabricio Werdum, I think it was so stupid, because his first fight he lost to Andre Arlovski, and then he beat Brandon Vera, who's a striker, and Gabriel Gonzaga, who's a striker, and then loses to Julio Dos Santos. And then you cut him from the UFC, which I don't really understand why. But anyways, going off course there, so back to this fight. I think that Roy Nelson is the better fighter. I think he'll be able to keep it standing, but even though I think he's the better striker, I think he's still going to lose to Fabricio Werdum. I'm going to go Fabricio Werdum by a decision, and yeah, that's it really. So I think Roy Nelson will do alright though. He'll put up a good fight, and hopefully he can catch Fabricio Werdum with a big right hand that he throws, but we'll see how it goes. Anyways, Fabricio Werdum by decision.
It's time!
Yep, and now on to the main event. We have Nick Diaz versus Carlos Condit. Both of these fighters are well versatile in experience-wise. They've had about 35 fights each. Nick Diaz is coming off a big win over BJ Penn, and Carlos Condit is coming off a big win over Ding Yong Kim, previously an undefeated fighter. Looking at both these guys, Nick Diaz has great striking, great jiu-jitsu, one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in the UFC that we have today. Looking at Carlos Condit, got great striking, got great killer instinct. That's why he's called the natural born killer, because when he comes to finish, he finishes fights. That's why he's finished 3 of his last 4, and all of them being by TKO. His ground game, I'd say if any person's got a weakness in this fight, it will be Carlos Condit. I know he's got 13 submissions and 13 knockouts, and one fight that's only gone to decision, which he's won. But I'd say he's not as good as Nick Diaz on the ground. No doubt about it, if he caught Nick Diaz with a a knee or something like that, he'll put him away. But I think that Nick Diaz, his boxing is going to be a bit more superior. Even though I think it's scrappy, it's just going to be one of them things where I think that Carlos Condit will have the same problem that BJ Penn had, and he will not be able to use his striking to the best of his ability. It's like the Nick Diaz brothers, they pull people into their type of fight, like Donald Cerrone, when he was fighting Nick Diaz, he got pulled into a boxing match, and I think that's what Nate Diaz is going to be able to do in this fight. He's going to be able to pull Carlos Condit into a boxing match instead of a kickboxing match, which it should be on the feet. So in this fight, breaking it down, I'm looking at Nick Diaz winning this fight. I don't know if he's going to finish Carlos Condit, because he's hard to finish. If it goes to the ground, I think he can finish it pretty easy. Standing up, I don't think so. Yeah, so I think I've got to go with Nate Diaz, and I think he's going to be a real big test for GSP, which is going to be really interesting, because I think Nate Diaz has been wanting to be after GSP for a while, and he's not lost a fight pretty much since 2006, and the fight that he did lose, he fought the guy again and beat him. So what can I say? I'm going to say Nick Diaz I'm going to say 4th round submission. Just, yeah, put it out there. 4th round submission for Nick Diaz, and he's going to become the new interim welterweight title holder for the UFC, and that's it really. So Nick Diaz for the win, 4th round submission. Yep, and that's it for my UFC predictions. 143, Nate Diaz versus Carlos Condit for the interim welterweight title in the UFC. Make sure you rate, comment and subscribe. Check out my other videos. I'll leave some on the next page where you can click on the link. You can watch me knocking out some officer, me on my last predictions, and my further predictions. So this is Runner signing out. Peace.